That's awesome, man. I have like a shit ton of disparate thoughts. I don't know if I can weave them together elegantly, but it sounds like a part of your question is the answer to the problem of the intrusion of the real, and where do the chips fall, and what do we make of that? Do we just let the pieces fall where they have, and kind of do what we can to explicate to ourselves from there? And once the real has intruded into you in an eruption way, in Heidegger's like eruption with an I type sense, it to me feels like, yeah, it is too little too late, because ideally that Dionysian flood that periodically hits, but it doesn't feel like a negative thing. It feels like the thing that was ought to come anyway, and your predisposition would be like Noah as he's building the ark. Like, you just know full well, even though everything around you is actually falsely deluding you into thinking the wrong thing, but you resist the external stimuli, and like, to put it in bro language, stick to your guns, which is where a lot of philosophical introspection comes in. Aren't we simply trying to, isn't the name of the game when we're talking about self-refinement simply intuition refinement and impulse correctness? Aren't we simply trying to make sure that we can properly, with exactitude as much as possible in the game of life, prepare for floods? Can we make sure that our offerings to God are in fact satisfactory, and we're not trying to pull one over logos, which you're never going to win? I particularly like the language you used with clothing, garments. All we're doing is garnishing and ornamenting ourselves with garments, in the sense of momentary stabilizations. And once we're wearing a particularly nice, say, combination of haberdashery, we call that clothing, we call that identity, and this is me, and this is my name, and my address is this. But that's about to be wiped away. And I wonder if philosophy is simply just playing the right meta game to reduce suffering, because I don't think by any stretch of the imagination that our point of existence is to reduce suffering. I'm not here to feel as much pleasure and as little pain as possible. And I know neither are you, but that is an existentialist, consequentialist position that was really popular and still pervades to this day in contemporary culture as well. That we're here simply to ameliorate as much suffering as possible for as many people as possible for as long as possible, which, something as basic as that, if you can't even get that right, you're probably not primed, I think Aristotle would agree, to engage into the battleground of philosophy. So yeah, your identity is kind of primed to be dissolved, to be eviscerated periodically. Handling it correctly is moving up the world tree. It is transcendence. But the thing that is getting dissolved, the thing that's just waiting to be annihilated, is itself precarious. And we often used, and even in previous discussions, the analogy of Nietzsche's tightrope walker, right? The proper state of approach must be something like precariousness. You have to realize that a snapshot is exactly that. It gives you like a live time picture of something. It gives you a coordinate. It gives you a latitude and a longitude. It doesn't give you anything more than that. Life isn't coordinates. So knowing full well that you have to die, engaging in philosophy proper would mean learning to die gracefully, and hopefully not all of you, not your entire corporeal self, just dies. Hopefully it's parts of you, such that there's enough strength left in the leftover identity to carry your ashes up the mountain, like we spoke about. And with each subsequent death and rebirth, we're also invoking what you mentioned rather elegantly last time about standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Like the Newton quote. There's a cumulative nature to every subsequent death and rebirth, where it's not just the same thing happening again and again, and we're not trapped in this, say, Schopenhauerian samsara of just endless suffering for no point. There's a point if you want there to be a point. Yeah, and then I was also reminded as you were talking about, the zeroing in nature of these death and rebirth cycles, however allegorically we want to talk about them. And I'll just read out this quote from Beyond Good and Evil, where he talks about this pendulum nature and oscillation and how we zero in on truth. It's similar to Tolstoy and how he spoke about it. It seems that in order to inscribe themselves upon the heart of humanity with everlasting claims, all great things have first to wander about the earth as enormous and awe-inspiring creatures or caricatures. Dogmatic philosophy has been a caricature of this kind. So again, I think with this idea of we've spoken about philosophy as physiology and philosophy as alchemy, philosophy also has to be the game of being healthily susceptible, I think. And a big sort of undercurrent to that would just be playing the right meta game. And I was reminded of Quidditch from Harry Potter and how Harry, the chosen one, right? The boy who lived, the special one, the hero's journey protagonist. He's the one who's playing the right meta game. He's the seeker. He's the one chosen and tasked with the task of um, putting all his resources into attaining the snitch. If you win the snitch, you win the entire game, and everything else sort of neatly organizes itself in the right pattern. So I wonder if Quidditch, because J.K. Rowling knew about alchemy, if anyone did, she did. um, I wonder if it's a giant metaphor, Quidditch that is a giant metaphor for the proper configuration of psychic elements and subpersonalities, and how things kind of organize themselves into fruitful and useful and clean and neat patterns if you're just orientated correctly. And that would mean, reducing misperception, reducing self delusion, optical illusion and delusion, playing the right metagame, that is. And so much of the mire and the malaise that we feel in today's culture, perhaps spurred on by, hyper consumer culture, hyper reality, capitalism in its late stage, now moving towards techno feudalism, but starting all the way, in my mind, with, say, the Underground Man and the Existentialist Project, can just be easily avoided with the right insights. Like, I don't think the state that a man or a woman has to be one of anxiety all the time. We posit the individual as this despair driven, like contemptible person with so many limitations, and they're always confronted by their own limitations. And all there is like kind of depravity in the other world. And all you're trying to do is resist the wickedness and maleficence of other beings. And everything's so hard, but for these fleeting moments of pleasure, I think it's the exact opposite. Like, I have 2 days every 6 months where I'm sad. And I think that's just like, it's so simple. It's nothing that I'm doing right. It's nothing but aiming for the right meta game. And I guess the other way you could put it is not worshiping false idols. That's an easy way to be sidelined from the life of your own game somehow. So hopefully somewhere in that you heard an answer to the question of death, rebirth, like identity dissolution, and all of that stuff.